Mercury, the smallest planet hiding impossible secrets. Mercury is the smallest planet in our solar system. It is also the planet closest to the Sun. From Earth, it looks almost insignificant. A tiny point of light lost in the brightness of the sky. But that tiny world hides some of the strangest secrets ever discovered in our solar system. A planet where the Sun rises and takes almost 3 months to rise again. A planet hot enough to melt some metals, yet cold enough to preserve water as ice. A planet almost completely exposed to the violence of the Sun, yet somehow possessing a magnetic field, and beneath its surface there may be a clue to one of the greatest mysteries of planetary formation. This is Mercury, and the closer we look, the stranger it becomes. Mercury races around the Sun faster than any other planet. One complete orbit takes only 88 Earth days. For Mercury, that's an entire year. But something bizarre happens when the planet turns on its axis. Mercury rotates once every 59 Earth days. Because of the way its rotation and orbit are synchronized, the time from one sunrise to the next is about 176 Earth days. So while Mercury completes one trip around the Sun, its surface experiences only half of one solar day. A year passes before the Sun completes the full cycles across the sky. Think about what that means. If you stood on Mercury and watched the Sun rise over the horizon, you would have to wait almost 6 Earth months before seeing that sunrise again. But the strange clock of Mercury is only the beginning. When sunlight reaches the surface, Mercury becomes a furnace. Temperatures can climb to around 430 degrees Celsius. Then the Sun disappears, and everything changes. Without a substantial atmosphere to trap and redistribute heat, the surface rapidly loses energy. Temperatures can plunge to around -180 degrees Celsius. More than 600 degrees separate Mercury's hottest and coldest conditions. It is a planet caught between fire and darkness. And yet, something even more unexpected is happening beneath your feet. Mercury is incredibly dense. For such a small planet, it contains an enormous amount of metal. At its center is a gigantic metallic core that occupies an unusually large portion of the planet. Why? No one knows for certain. One theory suggests that Mercury may once have possessed much more rocky material than early in the solar system's history. A catastrophic collision may have stripped away some of that outer material, leaving behind a world dominated by its metallic heart. Another possibility is that Mercury formed from metal-rich material near the young Sun. But if that's the answer, why did the planet form this way in the first place? The mystery remains. And then scientists discovered something that made Mercury even more unusual: a magnetic field. That shouldn't sound shocking. Earth has one, but Mercury is tiny. Its magnetic field is weak compared with Earth's, and yet it exists deep inside Mercury. The enormous metallic core is still active enough to generate a global magnetic field. That field creates an invisible battlefield around the planet. The Sun constantly fires a stream of charged particles into space. Mercury sits directly in the path of that solar wind. The particles slam into its magnetic environment, twist around it, and create violent electromagnetic interactions. In some regions, the solar wind can punch through parts of Mercury's magnetic shield and deliver energy directly toward the surface. Mercury isn't simply orbiting the Sun. It is being bombarded by it every second of every day. And the planet carries the scars. Look at Mercury's surface and you'll see a landscape frozen in time. Thousands of craters cover the planet. Some were created billions of years ago. Others are much younger. There are no oceans to erase them, no forests to cover them, no powerful weather system to slowly reshape them. Mercury remembers. Every impact leaves a scar, and some scars are enormous. One of the largest is the Caloris Basin. Billions of years ago, an enormous object slammed into Mercury. The collision released an unimaginable amount of energy. The impact created a basin thousands of kilometers across, but the violence didn't stop at the point of impact. Shock waves traveled through the planet and produced unusual terrain on the opposite side. One collision had effectively shaken an entire world. And yet, the most astonishing discovery on Mercury isn't an enormous crater. It is something far smaller. Something almost impossible. Ice. Water ice. On Mercury. At first, that sounds ridiculous. How could frozen water survive on the planet closest to the Sun? The answer is hidden in darkness. Near Mercury's poles are deep craters whose floors never receive direct sunlight. The crater walls block the Sun. And because the Sun never reaches certain parts of these craters, those regions remain permanently shadowed. Temperatures there can stay unbelievably low, cold enough for water ice to remain stable. Radar observations detected bright deposits in these polar craters. Then NASA's Messenger spacecraft provided stronger evidence. Mercury wasn't completely dry. It was hiding frozen water in the darkest places on its surface. Think about the contradiction. The closest planet to the Sun. Contains ice. Not on a distant mountain, not beneath a massive glacier, but inside craters where sunlight may never reach. And that discovery raises an even bigger question. Who brought the water there? Perhaps comets carried it. Perhaps asteroids delivered water-bearing material. Perhaps impacts helped move volatile compounds toward Mercury's poles. Scientists are still investigating the full story. And that means the ice may be more than an interesting discovery. It could be a time capsule, a frozen record of material that existed during the earliest history of our solar system. Mercury could be preserving evidence of how water and other volatile materials traveled through the region around the young Sun. But reaching Mercury is incredibly difficult. Spacecraft don't simply point toward the planet and fly there. Mercury orbits deep inside the Sun's gravitational well. A spacecraft traveling from Earth has to carefully change its trajectory and shed enormous amounts of orbital energy. The Sun also makes the environment brutally hot. That is why Mercury remained poorly understood for so long. Then came Mariner 10. In the 1970s, it became the first spacecraft to visit Mercury. But Mariner 10 could only observe part of the planet's surface. For decades, huge portions of Mercury remained mysterious. Then another spacecraft arrived. Messenger. It became the first spacecraft ever to orbit Mercury. And suddenly, Mercury began revealing itself. Messenger mapped the planet. It studied its magnetic field. It investigated its enormous core. It examined strange surface features. And it helped confirm the existence of water ice near the poles. After years of exploration, Messenger's mission finally ended. The spacecraft ran out of fuel. And on April 30, 2015, it crashed into Mercury. But humanity wasn't finished. Another mission was already heading toward this mysterious world. Bepi Colombo, a joint mission involving the European Space Agency and Japan's Space Agency. Its goal is to study Mercury from a completely new perspective. Because many questions remain unanswered. Why does Mercury have such a massive core? How did that core form? How does its magnetic field work? What happened during the enormous impacts that shaped its surface? How much water ice is actually trapped in its polar craters? And perhaps the biggest question, what can Mercury teach us about how planets are born? Because Mercury isn't just a strange planet. It may be a surviving piece of the solar system's violent past. A world that has been orbiting the Sun for more than 4 billion years, while carrying the evidence of everything that happened around it. Every crater. Every rock. Every layer of ice. Could contain part of that story. Mercury may be the smallest planet, but it has an enormous metallic heart. It has a magnetic field. It has temperatures that swing across hundreds of degrees. It has a day longer than its year. It has survived colossal impacts, and hidden in eternal darkness. It has water. The closer we get to Mercury, the less ordinary it becomes. What looks like a small, lifeless rock from Earth is actually a world of contradictions. A world where fire exists beside ice, where darkness protects water. Where the sun dominates the sky, yet cannot erase the planet's magnetic shield, and where billions of years of cosmic violence remain written across the surface. Mercury doesn't need to be the biggest planet to tell one of the biggest stories, because sometimes the smallest worlds hide the deepest secrets, and Mercury may still be hiding its greatest secret of all. This is beyond Earth. And the universe is far stranger than we ever imagined.